There comes a point in life, whether for a person or for a nation, when you realize that your self-respect is worth more than any glittering offer placed before you. It is in that moment you understand that not every opportunity is worth taking, and not every handshake is a blessing. India's decision to end trade with America was not a rash act, nor was it driven by anger. It was an act of quiet courage, rooted in the belief that dignity can never be traded for convenience. Think about it. How often do we, in our own lives, accept less than what we deserve just to keep the peace? How often do we allow someone else to dictate our worth because we fear losing what they offer? Nations are no different. For years, the trade may have brought material benefits, but hidden within those agreements were terms that chipped away at independence like a slow erosion of the spirit. India saw that accepting those terms, even silently, would mean sacrificing something far greater than exports or imports. It would mean compromising on the very principles that define her identity. Sometimes walking away is not the easy choice, it is the hardest one. Because walking away doesn't just mean losing the deal, it means facing the uncertainty of what comes next. It means choosing a road where you have to build your own bridges instead of using the ones offered to you. But it is in that leap of faith that true empowerment begins. And India chose that leap, believing in her own ability to stand tall without leaning on someone else's shadow. Self-respect is not a word we use lightly. It is a value that demands sacrifices. The world often measures success by profits and trade volumes, but real success is measured by the ability to protect what truly matters. For India, it was not just about saying no to unfair terms. It was about sending a message to every citizen, every young mind, and every future leader. We will not sell our dignity, not for all the gold in the world. And here lies the beauty of such a choice. When you choose self-respect over short-term gain, you inspire a generation to do the same in their own lives. You teach them that there will always be another deal, another chance, another path, but there will never be another you. Once dignity is lost, it cannot be bought back. India's decision was a reminder that in life, and in diplomacy, the most powerful move is not always the one that gets applause. It is the one that keeps your head high when no one is watching, and sometimes the greatest victory is simply knowing you did not bow. There is a unique kind of power in saying no. It is not the loud, aggressive power that seeks to dominate, but the quiet, unshakable power that comes from knowing your worth. When India decided to end trade with America under terms that were no longer fair, it was not a gesture of defiance for the sake of pride. It was an act of self-preservation. Saying no meant refusing to be part of a system where the scales were tipped and the benefit was lopsided. It meant acknowledging that the temptation of easy access to markets and resources could not outweigh the harm of long-term dependency and imbalance. In life, many of us are conditioned to say yes because we fear what might happen if we say no. We think we will lose opportunities, relationships, or stability. But the truth is every no to something wrong is also a yes to something better, self-respect, fairness, and a future free from silent compromises. India's decision was exactly that, a yes to its own ability to stand without leaning, to compete without conceding its values, to grow without accepting conditions that stifle true progress. The courage to refuse is not born overnight. It comes from years of learning, struggling, and realizing that survival is not enough. Thriving with integrity is what truly matters. For a long time, the trade relationship may have seemed beneficial, but when examined closely, it became clear that it was also creating invisible chains. These chains are the hardest to break because they do not rattle loudly, they are woven into the comfort of routine and the illusion of mutual benefit. Breaking them requires vision, and even more, it requires bravery. India's no was not just to America, it was to the idea that fairness can be negotiated at the cost of equality. It was a statement to the world that while partnerships are valuable, they cannot come at the expense of sovereignty. And here's the thing about saying no from a place of strength, it changes the balance of respect. People, nations, start to see you differently. They may question you at first, even criticize you, but deep down, they recognize that such a decision can only be made by someone who knows they can walk alone if they have to. This is a lesson for all of us, whether it's in trade, relationships, or life choices. The power to say no is the power to define your boundaries. It is the ability to look at something tempting and still walk away because you know you deserve better. And when you do that, you don't just protect yourself, you set an example. You remind others that dignity is never given, it is claimed. And claiming it sometimes means turning your back on what looks good so you can open your arms to what is truly right. There is always a price to pay for compromise, and sometimes that price is far greater than we realize in the moment. On paper, a trade deal might look profitable, numbers may shine brightly in reports, and short-term benefits may feel reassuring. But beneath those figures can lie a silent erosion, an erosion of independence, of fairness, of the ability to make decisions without external pressure. India saw this truth. It recognized that the terms of trade were slowly chipping away at something priceless, the ability to stand as an equal on the world stage. And no matter how much profit flowed in, the loss of that equality would cost far more in the long run. We often think compromise is a sign of maturity, and in many areas of life it is. But there's a kind of compromise that is dangerous, the one where you give away your core values for the sake of temporary comfort. It's like selling your roof to buy a beautiful carpet. It might make your home look good for a while, but it leaves you exposed to storms you cannot control. India understood this. Keeping an unequal trade agreement might have kept the numbers looking steady, but it would have weakened the very foundation on which the nation's growth depended. There is another truth we often ignore. Once you get used to bending for the sake of convenience, standing straight becomes harder with every passing day. The cost of compromise is not just what you give away today, it's the strength you lose for tomorrow. India's choice to walk away was not about losing an economic opportunity, it was about preserving the inner steel that allows a nation to say, "We will not be dictated to, no matter the cost." It is a lesson for individuals as much as for nations. How many times have we kept silent in the face of unfairness because we feared losing something? A job, a relationship, a sense of stability. And yet, every time we do, we give away a small part of ourselves. That is why India's decision resonates so deeply. It shows that real strength lies not in how much you gain, but in what you refuse to lose. By refusing to compromise on its principles, India proved that it is willing to take the harder road if it means walking it with dignity. It sent a message, not just to America, but to every country watching: partnerships are welcome, but submission is not for sale. The hidden cost of compromise is too high, and when you understand that, you realize that sometimes the most profitable choice is to walk away from profit itself. There is a moment in every journey when you realize that leaning on someone for too long has made your own legs forget how to walk. For decades, trade relationships may have seemed like mutually beneficial bridges, but over time, Some of those bridges turned into crutches. India understood this when it looked closely at the terms of its trade with America. The benefits came with invisible strings, strings that pulled decisions in directions that didn't always align with India's vision for itself. Ending that trade agreement wasn't just about numbers, it was about breaking free from the quiet chains of dependence. Self-reliance is never born in comfort. It grows in the soil of challenges, in the moments when you must fend for yourself, when every choice carries the weight of uncertainty. India's decision was a declaration that it was ready to stand on its own feet, even if the ground ahead was uneven. It was a decision that said, "We will no longer measure our strength by what others give us, but by what we can create for ourselves." There is a deep courage in choosing independence over convenience. Dependence can be seductive. It offers a sense of security, of predictability. But the cost is high. It can limit your freedom to make bold moves, to innovate without permission, to follow your own vision without compromise. India realized that real progress doesn't come from comfort. It comes from the ability to chart your own path, even if it means building roads where none exist. For individuals, this is a familiar lesson. How many of us have stayed in situations, jobs, partnerships, friendships, because we feared we couldn't survive without them? And yet, the moment we decide to step out, we discover a strength we didn't know we had. The same is true for nations. The courage to let go of reliance is the first step toward discovering your full potential. India's move toward self-reliance is not about isolation. It's about empowerment. It's about engaging with the world as an equal, not as a dependent. It's about choosing partnerships that are balanced, not ones that come with quiet compromises. And in doing so, India is also sending a message to its people that the nation believes in its own capacity to grow, to produce, to innovate, and to compete without leaning on unfair advantages from others. Breaking free from dependence is never easy. It requires patience, resilience, and faith in the unseen. But it is in that leap into uncertainty that true strength is built. And India, by choosing this path, has shown that the only way to rise higher is to first stand on your own. Sometimes the loudest statement you can make is to say nothing at all. When India ended its trade with America, there were no shouting matches, no public confrontations, no dramatic threats. It was a quiet decision, carried out with the dignity of someone who knows their worth. And yet that silence spoke louder than any fiery declaration could have. It told the world, "We have made our choice, and we don't need to justify it to anyone." There's a strength in restraint that many overlook. Noise often comes from insecurity, from the need to be heard and validated. But when you act with conviction, you don't seek approval. You let your actions speak for themselves. India's decision was like a stone dropped into still water. The ripples reached every corner of the globe. Countries watched, markets shifted, and leaders began to question what had triggered such a confident move. The silence became a mirror in which others were forced to examine their own actions. In life, we often think that making an impact requires grand gestures or loud announcements. But the truth is, the most profound changes often begin in quiet moments. When you decide to walk away, when you refuse to engage in battles that don't deserve your energy, when you make a choice and let the results do the talking. India's silence was not weakness. It was a strategic, unshakable calm that said more than 1,000 speeches ever could. This is a powerful lesson for individuals too. How many times have we wasted our strength trying to explain our decisions to people who were never going to understand them? Sometimes the best way to prove your point is not with words, but with the life you build after making the choice. The transformation, the growth, the undeniable results. These are the answers that silence delivers with perfect clarity. By choosing to walk away quietly, India demonstrated that strength is not always in confrontation. It is often in the refusal to engage in games that drain your energy. It is the discipline to keep your head high, your focus forward, and your energy invested in building the future rather than defending the past. The world heard the message loud and clear: India will not be cornered, pressured, or reduced to a bargaining chip. In diplomacy, as in life, silence can be a roar, and in this case, India's quiet move will echo for years to come, not because of what was said, but because of what was done. The absence of noise became the presence of undeniable strength. Beneath every political move, beyond the numbers and the negotiations, there lies a truth that cannot be measured in currency. Self-worth is priceless. This is the hidden truth behind India's decision to end trade with America. It wasn't merely an economic choice. It was a statement about value, about knowing when to say, "We are worth more than this." A nation, like a person, can only be treated according to the value it places on itself, and when that value is non-negotiable, it commands respect. India understood that no matter how lucrative a trade might seem, if it comes at the cost of dignity, the price is too high. Wealth can be rebuilt, markets can be regained, opportunities can be created, but once self-worth is compromised, the damage runs deep and lingers for generations. Walking away was not a rejection of opportunity, but a refusal to be undervalued. In our personal lives, the same rule applies. People will often test the limits of what we will accept. They may offer us something valuable on the surface, but hidden beneath may be expectations that strip away our confidence, independence, or authenticity. If we do not know our worth, we may accept these terms without realizing what we're losing. But the moment we truly understand our value, we stop negotiating over things that should never be on the table: our dignity, our principles, our freedom to decide our own path. India's choice sent a ripple far beyond trade policies. It showed its citizens and the watching world that a nation grounded in self-worth will not be swayed by pressure, intimidation, or even tempting short-term gains. This is how legacies are built, not through compromise for the sake of ease, but through sacrifice for the sake of honor. There's also an empowering lesson here about patience. When you choose self-worth, you might not see immediate rewards. In fact, you might face hardship at first, but that hardship is the soil in which resilience grows. Over time, it produces something far stronger than quick profits. It builds an unshakable foundation for future growth, one that no external power can undermine. The hidden truth is this: a nation that knows its worth does not need to beg for fair treatment. It demands it by the way it carries itself. And just like individuals, such a nation will attract partnerships built on respect, not on exploitation. India's decision was a reminder to the world that true value comes from within, and once that value is claimed, it becomes untouchable. Self-worth cannot be bought. It cannot be traded. It cannot be discounted. It is the silent force that determines how the world sees you, and more importantly, how you see yourself. And when a nation like India declares that its worth is beyond negotiation, the world has no choice but to listen.